After America is made on the lands of the Kure, Wurrung, Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. We pay our respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded.
We are in a battle for the soul of America.
This is a fraud on the American public.
Hi, I'm Emma Shortis, and this is After America. You might have noticed that we're a little bit early this week. That's partly because time zones are pretty annoying. That eagerly anticipated meeting between Donald Trump and Anthony Albanese will happen in the early hours of Tuesday morning, Australian time. And we wanted to cover it. So this week we've got an episode for you now, and then we'll be back on Wednesday afternoon with a special crossover episode of After America and Follow the Money. Will Donald Trump call the Australian Prime Minister beautiful? Will we give away all of our critical minerals in the hope that Daddy will still protect us? Tune in later this week to find out. Trump himself has just been in Egypt at a summit on Gaza.
The war is over, okay? You understand that?
This is the day that people across the region and around the world have been working, striving, hoping, and praying for. We have Hungary. Oh, Victor, where is Victor? Victor. We love Victor. Victor, I call him. You know, I put the little accent on it. You are fantastic, all right? I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but I'm the only one that matters. You are fantastic. Sincere thanks to President Erdogan of Turkey. He's always there when I need him. He's such a tough guy. He is tough as you can be. United Kingdom. Where's United Kingdom? Where's Russia? Come here. Is everything going good?
As I record this on Thursday, the 16th of October, the ceasefire agreement Trump brokered with Netanyahu is already being tested. Trump has declared that the war is over, but a welcome but pretty shaky ceasefire and lasting peace are not the same thing. And as if to make that point, Trump is once again threatening Hamas with obliteration and offering Netanyahu an out.
Well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them.
How will you do that?
I don't have to explain that to you. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently.
The president answered my questions on text about his hopes for this nascent deal. I asked him, what happens if Hamas insists on staying in power in Gaza? The president said, complete obliteration.
The US president continues his all-out assault on the rule of law, both internationally and at home. To discuss the ceasefire, the state of international law, and the prerequisites for genuine peace, we have a very special guest for you this week. Judge Navi Pillay is the former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and a former judge at the International Criminal Court. She now chairs the Commission of Inquiry on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Navi is also the 2025 Sydney Peace Prize Laureate. Navi, thank you so much for joining us on After America.
I'm very pleased to join you.
Thank you, when we know you've been so busy. About a month ago now, Navi, the UN Human Rights Council Commission of Inquiry released its report, which concluded on reasonable grounds that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces have committed and are continuing to commit acts of genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Could you tell us a little bit about the ongoing international reaction to that landmark report?
Well, first, let me clarify that this is not a mandated report. We are mandated to do 2 reports in a year, limited to 8,000 words each. And we've been banking all our material and put them out periodically, but now we looked at all this information that we had personally investigated and tested, and we called it a conference room paper because it was not on the agenda of the Human Rights Council. But nevertheless, it's been given a UN number, and it's our report, as you quite correctly say. So I had to explain why it's not on the agenda of the Human Rights Council for June when we were there. And so we called an informal meeting sponsored by some states, including Palestine. And that surprised me, the large number of states' representatives who attended that meeting. So firstly, the overwhelming numbers of representatives who attended an event which was not really on the agenda of the Human Rights Council is, to me, interesting in my experience. They have enough meetings to go to. But the response from the public all over the world was truly impressive. We were busy for 2 days, Chris Sidoti, the other commissioner, and I, handling media interviews and broadcasts as we spread and disseminated the report. And then we got the feedback of how the public received the report. And to my mind, that's because we set out our methodology and we set out evidence. So it's like you'd prepare a judgment, yet we're not a court of law. We don't have the powers of a court of law. And I think the report was received because each person reading it or hearing it can themselves come to a decision. You look at the evidence, you look at what the political leaders said when they gave instructions to their soldiers. And all over the world, for once I was very pleased with social media on the millions of people who've now seen this report.
Absolutely. And it is, it certainly rightly, I think, has gotten a lot of attention.
17 judges of the UN's top legal body took part in the deliberations on South Africa's case against Israel, brought under the Genocide Convention.
The international community has repeatedly failed. It failed the people of Rwanda. It had failed the Bosnian people and the Rohingya, prompting this court to take action. It failed again by ignoring the early warnings of the grave risk of genocide to the Palestinian people.
Minister Gallant stated, speaking to Israeli troops on the Gaza border, I quote, "I have released all restraints. You saw what we are fighting against. We are fighting human animals. This is the ISIS of Gaza." The court is also of the view that Israel must take measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to the members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip.
The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it.
You mentioned, though, that this issue was not on the agenda of the UN Human Rights Council. Are there still obligations that arise for UN member states as a result of the findings of this report, which is so deeply serious?
Well, we made our own recommendations, but the important thing is there's a court order, and it's the court, the ICJ, is the court for states. And we all know there's an order by that court, which is now 1 year old, with laying down the responsibilities of states. And the court is scheduled to deliver an advisory opinion on that on the 16th of October in a few days' time. So the duty to prevent and punish genocide apply not only to states who are involved in it, but every state, whether the genocide is taking place in their country or not. Our recommendations were, one, to ensure that Israel implements all orders for provisional measures issued by the International Court of Justice, and that there's an obligation on all states to take steps to ensure the prevention of conduct that may amount to genocidal acts under the Genocide Convention, including the transfer of weapons that are used or likely to be used by Israel to commit genocidal acts. States must also cease the transfer of other equipment or items, including jet fuel, to the State of Israel or third states where there is reason to suspect their use in military operations that have involved or could involve the commission of genocide. Thirdly, states have an obligation to conduct investigations and take steps to ensure the punishment of genocide. States must ensure that individuals and corporations in their territories and within their jurisdiction are not involved in the commission of genocide. And next, to facilitate investigations and domestic proceedings and take action, including imposing sanctions against the State of Israel and against individuals or corporations that are involved in or facilitating the commission of genocide or incitement to commit genocide. So this is where the speech that leaders make become very important because it could amount to incitement to genocide. And we're also asking states to intervene in the International Court of Justice proceedings of South Africa versus Israel, and to support and cooperate fully with the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court in its investigation into the situation in the state of Palestine. Now, we didn't just make this up. This is the language of the Genocide Convention, where states don't have a choice. They are under a legal obligation to punish genocide and prevent genocide. And this is not a court of law, obviously. We don't have the powers of the court of law, but until the ICJ delivers its ruling on whether there is genocide or not, that's the South Africa case, this then becomes the most authoritative document. And this is why we followed the standards set by the ICJ, which is the only reasonable inference from the facts that we gathered.
Are you confident that the ceasefire is going to hold?
I think so. I think it's going to hold. I think people are a lot of reasons why it's going to hold, but I think people are tired of it.
Since that report has been released and those recommendations have been made, I think it's safe to say that they have not been implemented, at least not to the degree which would be necessary. But there has been a tentative ceasefire put in place. What do you make of the ceasefire agreement?
Well, it's not only the ceasefire agreement, because that firstly is huge for Palestinians. The bombs have stopped raining down on them, and we saw footage of how they were able to move about and go back to their homes if there are any homes left. We called for a cessation of hostilities as early as the 10th of October 2023, because the Hamas attack occurred on the 7th, and the counterattack or retaliation by Israel took place on the same day, on the 7th October. And therefore, like everyone else, we welcome this ceasefire, but it's not a peace agreement that has to follow immediately. And I think the ICJ ruling on provisional measures should be followed. They're not being followed in this ceasefire plan, which is the occupation must end immediately. And the United Nations must be involved in the distribution of humanitarian aid. And the Secretary General has announced immediately that the UN stands ready to cooperate because they have the resources and experienced personnel who could carry this through. Those are then the two urgent matters. Cease the bombing, and secondly, let the food and aid come in. That's why I think that we welcome this ceasefire. And I don't know the details. Obviously, they're still discussing this matter. So that's my first response. The second is that they have to involve the Palestinians. They are well able to govern themselves. And you can't have a solution imposed on them. It's been done like that in the past, never implemented, and always to their disadvantage. This is not the first crisis to happen in Gaza where many lives were lost. I've myself been through several of these when I served as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And so that's the next anxiety by everyone. Will this last? Who are the people driving this? And so human rights is very clear. You have to hand it to the Palestinians to take charge and determine their self-determination and not go back to the old colonial ways of imposing a solution on them. And obviously it has to include the whole of occupied Palestine, because that's what the ICJ order does. In the meantime, the people have relief. They could breathe. They could look for their families, friends, and relatives. So it's an important point. I also hail the release of hostages. We named the taking of hostages by Hamas as a war crime. It's definitely not allowed under international law, and we call the crimes they were committing then, Hamas's crimes, as war crimes and crimes against humanity. We investigated that. We have the information. If there's any investigation of Hamas by Israel or any other country, and we receive a request from them to share the information we have, we will certainly do so, because our mandate from the Human Rights Council directs us to do that. The gathering of information on the part of our commission is not just to present a report to the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly. It doesn't just remain there, because our mandate directs us to share the information with any institutions that are holding judicial proceedings. We've received such requests from a state in Europe, for instance, that wants to conduct universal jurisdiction under their domestic laws. We've shared the information with South Africa for their application and the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. And that's what I mean by the importance of distributing the information we have. We're ready to do that in any investigation of Hamas's activities. In fact, I would say, as a lawyer, and all lawyers will agree, what do countries do when they are faced with terrorism? A few years ago, there were so many countries, including Spain. We had cases of terrorism in our country, South Africa, and so has the United States. As usual, you have to apply the law. You have to work under the rule of law. And that means investigation, prosecution, and trial, and sentencing by a court. It doesn't mean you go and assassinate the whole population. It does not mean that you identify the whole population as Hamas. And in this particular case, Israel did not distinguish between combatants and civilians.
Mm.
So these are some of the pointers in our report, which I hope will direct the attention of those drawing up the subsequent peace agreements to pay serious attention to.
Mm. I think that the distinction that you make between the ceasefire agreement and a peace plan is such an important one, because the 20-point plan that the United States and Israel announced, it does look forward to the future, to a version of rebuilding Gaza, but it does not cover accountability, which is, I think, what you were getting at there.
Yeah.
Is genuine peace possible without accountability? And what might that accountability look like?
The public demands justice and accountability. And let me speak from my experience as High Commissioner for Human Rights, where I conducted missions in 79 countries, including Israel at that time. It was from 2008 to 2014. Many Latin American countries who've been through peace processes. My own country had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And even now, 30 years after we gained our freedom, the public is still demanding that people involved in the apartheid atrocities must be tried. There's a commission sitting right now, a public commission, and this is what the public are saying. I came across this in Colombia too, when they were holding the peace talks there. The public in a referendum rejected the first draft because it didn't include justice and accountability. They had to go back to the drawing boards. So it's important for the drafters of the agreements that they attend to these key issues that were neglected from 1948. There is a Security Council resolution on two states, that's Israel, as well as Palestine. One half of that resolution was observed by member states and not the other. And therefore, the two-state solution or a solution acceptable to Palestinians and Israelis must be worked out. I'm very much in support of justice and accountability, and it was my key role as High Commissioner for Human Rights to ensure that those aspects are included.
Today and every day, let us resolve to never again remain silent in the face of evil and to always defend the dignity and rights of all.
We have seen, too, and I want to say again, that genocide can occur anywhere. It is not an African phenomenon and must never be viewed as such. We have seen it in industrialized Europe. We have seen it in Asia. We must have global vigilance. And never again must we be shy in the face of the evidence.
I call on all countries to become parties to the Genocide Convention without delay, and to honor the responsibility to protect their populations from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. Every state and every part of society must deliver on the promise enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to promote the human rights and dignity of all.
I think more broadly, Navi, the war on Gaza has revealed this almost a culture of growing impunity for war crimes, an impunity that now spans conflicts across the world. Is that what you are seeing?
We kept saying this threatens the whole multilateral system. This threatens what the world came together after World War II to set up and to deliver on this never again. So, as you can see, other states take sides in this conflict. States are supplying the weapons and all other things like the fuel that I mentioned. So then people are split, taking sides over this. Safety lies in following the UN's own rules. And that means all states, in cooperation with civil society organizations and so on, have devised this system of laws, which is a moral system of law to prevent and stop wars. Part of it, of course, is you must punish. There, in large letters, is the obligation imposed on every state under the Genocide Convention to punish. Now, why do we have such? I didn't pass that law. Civil society didn't. The states did. And it's their court. So it's glaring. I think every High Commissioner, before me and after me, has stated in public that actually states appear to be the greatest violators of international law. And that's a huge indictment against them. You passed this law. Why did they pass the Genocide Convention? It's to ensure that genocide never happens. It's not for after the fact and what do you do when thousands and thousands have been killed. This is why it's not a choice. It's mandatory that every state carries out what they agreed to in the Genocide Convention. So therefore, I see now what's happening when one state gets away with violating blatantly all these norms, standards. They violate the General Assembly resolution, which supports the ICJ Convention on what should be done, on provisional measures. And yet that hasn't been complied with. And the mandated year for compliance has already passed. I think then this is a serious message to all of us, because we support this mechanism built by states to ensure that there is no conflict that seriously harms civilians. It's a crime, and yet it's being done in front of our eyes. People have told me, why are you doing this report now? We can see it for ourselves on the screens. All of us are witnesses. So I have not in my long life seen this level of defiance of international law and standards, and that a state is getting away with it because of powerful support. You know that the ICJ is due to give its advisory opinion on the responsibilities of other states. And all high commissioners have addressed that. The states should begin firstly by implementing the resolutions or treaties that they have adopted. There is a lot of pushback, not only on these, but also in the struggle to get equality and gender rights and to end gender-based violence. So this should be a very strong call from all of us, the citizens of the world, calling upon states not just to talk and make fancy statements, but to implement these obligations.
Mm. And in the face, Navi, of this assault against those institutions and principles of international law, do you think that is the best way that I think grassroots call for action to rebuilding and strengthening those institutions?
Yes. The one thing that troubles all of us is how 5 states, the big powers, holding the veto in the Security Council, can stop investigations of their own acts. So that's one. I've been part of the movement for reform in the Security Council, and I agree. I'm an insider in the United Nations and yet an outsider because mine is a judicial experience. I'm not a former minister or so-and-so who's now taken over. I come from the NGO world, which is a people's world. It's not a block somewhere. And of course, there are very many ways where the United Nations should conduct a reform so that they act faster. One of the points I raised when I was a High Commissioner for Human Rights at the highest level is after we saw the United Nations rush out of Sri Lanka, and on our television screens we saw these children and everybody pleading with them not to leave. Well, I sat as a judge on the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda when witnesses described, and even the lieutenant who was ordered by UN headquarters to pull out of Rwanda when the genocide there was still taking place, that seemed to have been the practice of the UN, how fast to pack up and leave. And to add insult to injury, they use their planes to pick up foreigners, which really in the context of Rwanda meant white people who wanted to escape, were picked up by the UN planes. And I, sitting there as a judge from South Africa, having experienced racism at its worst, felt there's really something wrong here, that this is the way the UN conducts itself. And so we changed that procedure by the call should be not how to pack up and leave fast, but how to stay and maintain peace and to help the people. Now, people would say to me, yeah, but that's so simple. Isn't that the job of the UN? But it was not happening. Then that policy, a change in the policy about protecting people, was carried out for the first time in South Sudan. And I went there myself to see this. There, instead of shutting the gates of the UN compound and keeping refugees out there screaming in fright, in this case, acting on this policy, those gates were opened, the refugees were let in, and all the UN staff, generously shared their little container rooms. Not only the ethos of help and assisting and safeguarding these refugees. I would say that 90,000 people were saved that day by UN taking on the protective role as it should. So I can give you many other examples. I think the appointment of officials should be more transparent. And definitely I belong to the global women leaders, and their focus is on having a woman secretary general, and I support that as well. I liked when a change came for peace building, for instance, when they finally employed women peacekeepers. And it did help to keep the peace, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Finally, Navi, because of the significance of your experiences and your contributions, you are in fact the 2025 Sydney Peace Prize Laureate. So congratulations for that. You'll be visiting Australia next month to accept the award. I wanted to end, I suppose, by asking you what it is you hope to, draw attention to with this award, and how you might, or how you see Australia perhaps playing a role in the kind of peace building that you're describing.
That comes very easily to me because that was my role as High Commissioner for Human Rights. And so my last visit to Australia in around 2012 or 13 was as High Commissioner for Human Rights. At that time, the burning issue was the treatment of migrants, and I raised the point on why it's a very bad idea to send the migrants to a neighboring state of Malaysia when they themselves were not responding to their human rights complaints of people on the street there. And I had a very good trip. I had good meetings with the indigenous community right up north. So that position as High Commissioner made me very aware, A, of how proud Australians should be, ordinary Australians, and their value system, that this is very important to me. I said in my acceptance speech that was videotaped that actually South Africans receive and go to Australia with great expectations because of Australia's role in helping to end sports apartheid. So this is remarkable. You have a population so supportive, urging their governments to do much more, and I'll probably add my voice to that. I'm very glad that the new government has changed some of its voting patterns at the UN and are more supportive of assisting Palestinians. This is a welcome measure. Australia has a leading position, has a great deal of influence in their own region. I know they're part of the Western group in the UN, but they have an immediate leadership role to play in the Pacific around you. But otherwise, I will firstly recognize that Australia and its population are huge supporters of human rights. You have human rights commissions in your country. You hold inquiries. However, I must say what former Prime Minister Julia Gillard said in her speech to Parliament just before she retired, echoes around the world about the discrimination of women and the inequalities that they suffer. I think that Australia should follow that seriously because one of their leaders actually educated the whole world, not only the Australian Parliament at that time. So more plus than negative comments, I think. I'm not there, by no means am I there as a High Commissioner for Human Rights. I'm a civilian, and this came as a wonderful surprise to me, the Peace Award. None of us works with the notion of winning an award, except perhaps the current president of the United States, who thinks already that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. So and when we are judges, we are even more conscious about that we have a role to play in the courtroom. And of course, nobody gives judges awards. That's your job, and you do your work. Nor are we out there as public figures. So for all those reasons, I truly appreciate this recognition from the Sydney Peace Foundation.
Well, it's a very deserved one, Navi, and we are so looking forward to welcoming you to Australia and hearing more from you in the next month or so. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your time and your generosity and all the work that you do. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode. Judge Navi Pillay will be in Australia during the week of the 3rd of November for the award of the Sydney Peace Prize. Supported by the Australia Institute, Judge Pillay will speak at the Press Club in Canberra on the 4th and for 2 events in Sydney on the 5th and the 6th. Links are in the show notes. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the show. You can reach us via our email address, which is podcasts@australiainstitute.org.au. This episode was recorded on Monday, the 13th of October, Australian time. After America is supported by the Andrew Farron Foundation and produced by Angus Blackman. We'll be back next week. I'm Emma Shortis. Thanks for listening.